And let's see if we can get this going. Hello, everyone. How are you? I'm hoping that we're live now. I'm just waiting for someone to confirm for me. So I hear that there's no image. Perhaps, can you hear my voice? And it says here I'm presenting to everyone, so that's where I'm trying to make sense of this. So maybe there's a delay in the chat as well. So I'm typing in. And once we get this going, we'll get the show on the road. Oh, so do we have a black screen? Does anyone else able to see? Can you type into the chat, please? Looks like we have a number of people. That's fantastic. The chat box is actually underneath. Excellent. Thank you, Jan. So somebody sees me. That's wonderful. The chat box is under the video, and if you actually click on the, there's a little button on the side. You can click on that and you can pop open that particular box so that you can have it over to the side and work on that at the same time. Bonnie from Nebraska, excellent. And Sandy from New Hampshire. Oh, New Hampshire must be beautiful right now. I'm in London, Ontario, and we've got great colors here. I've been taking wonderful pictures. And I'm getting a lot of glare on the glasses. Let's see if I tilt that. That helps a bit. Then you can't see me. You can read the responses, but there's no sound. Do you have, sometimes I have my earplugs in, or maybe you have it on mute. So check, I'm gonna write that down, check your mute button. Okay, so Pat, hopefully we can get you up and running. Okay, and we'll see if we can get Kareem back in. I don't want to start until we've got things running properly. I'm so excited to be able to do this. Okay, great. I don't know who, it's JK. And oh, we've got Sarah all the way from Wyoming. That's fantastic. Good. So at least some of you are hearing me. And we'll see if we can get Pat. Maybe Pat has the mute button on. I sometimes do that, or I have actually left my earbuds plugged in and I can't figure out why I can't hear anything. Okay, who else do we have here? I've got 13 people listed, I think, or 28. I'm trying to figure out, there's two different numbers here. Good. Oh, Pat, you're refreshed. It's good. Okay, glad to have you here. Fantastic. How long has everyone been scrapbooking for? Maybe you can just type into the chat and we can see it's going. So how long have you been? Oh, refresh the link because it worked for me. So Kareem, they can see your message there. So if you're not seeing things, you can do that. So Joyce is saying hello. Joyce, where are you from? You can open up the chat, I believe. I don't know if it's on, if it will work on full screen or not. This is a new technology for Kareem and me. So you have to pop open the chat and it can open as a separate window. It might be on top of this particular video. So I've got my unattractive basement here because I figured this time of night, it's 10:34 right now up in Canada where I am in Ontario. And my dog has a bad habit of making lots of noises. So I thought, leave the dog upstairs and I'm down in the basement. So I don't have any nice decorations here for you. It is what it is. So welcome to everyone. So glad to have you here. And Karine asked me to talk to you guys about how to get better images for scrapbooking, because you guys are so talented. I've been taking a look on the Facebook group and seeing the kinds of images that you guys are creating, and they're just stunning. And the templates that Karine's business is able to provide for you are really interesting and unusual. And it's completely different kind of scrapbooking than what I'm used to seeing, which is a lot of embellishments and so forth. And so your work would really benefit from having more powerful images because that's the focal point. It's not the embellishments that are the focal point. And so I think what we're going to do then is that we're going to focus on trying to give you just a few tips. I don't want to overwhelm you because it can become overwhelming. I know even for me, I'm constantly learning. And I'm really excited to hear, and I'll keep the chat open so that I can see questions. So I can see Judy from Southern California. Oh, beautiful. And you've been scrapbooking for 30 years. Oh, that's amazing. And then from San Jose, Lynn, and she's been scrapbooking for over 10 years. Oh, that's fantastic. So I'd love to see you guys share some of your stuff and see, actually, if, on the Facebook group, when we're done this presentation and you're trying to implement some of these things, it would be really cool for me to see what worked, what didn't work, what you struggled with, so that we could adapt and adjust these presentations. Okay, that's fantastic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start because we've got about 6 minutes in, and if anyone's having troubles, you can enter it into the chat. Corinne, maybe you can just put that question into the chat in case anyone's having troubles getting in. And what I'd like to do is to present to you the presentation that I've prepared. So sorry, I'm just trying to get this here, and I've just realized it's on the wrong page, so I want to start at the right page. So there we go. The presentation I prepared for you, actually, I've created a file that we can talk about later on that'll summarize the key points. So if you're like me, I like to jot things down and write things down because it helps me, but I know for other people it's just important for them to look and to listen. So factor in what your learning style is and what will work best for you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up the presentation, and it's a PowerPoint presentation. And I am hoping that this works. So for the slideshow, we're going to play from the start. Oh boy. And I don't know what you can see. So you can see the whole screen. Okay, so what I'm going to do, sorry. Bernie Gould from California, scrapbooking for over 15 years. So a lot of California people. And then in Pennsylvania, that's not too far from me. So a lot of very talented long-term scrapbookers. So you guys are serious about this. So Corinne, when I open up the PowerPoint, when I had it in full screen, could you see it? Could you type it into the chat and let me know, please? Or somebody type it into the chat. I'm going to do this, and let's see if I have to have it on. Okay, so if it's like that, is it full screen? And then when I do this, does it go back to small screen, or does it stay in the full screen? So Corinne could see the whole screen. Do I have to change anything, or is it fine like that? I think there's a bit of a lag from the chat, from when I'm talking to when I receive information from the chat. So trying not to drag this out too long. Okay, so tell me if it's not, I can see the whole screen, but not the slide full size. Okay, because the only problem is if I put this slide full size, I can't see the chat. So it's probably things like you have. Okay, so what I might do is I'll start this way, and so slideshow. Okay, so play from start. So I'm going to start and then I'll move along. Okay, so I have no idea why I picked this particular title. It's a little bit strange, granted. Yeah, there's no reason for the title. So this is the top of the file that I'll be making available to you that will summarize some of this information. So I threw in some of the cool diagrams and so on. But what I want to do is I want to chunk it into 6 main points. So if we go back here, the tips, I've put it into 6 different categories. And the first category, there's a couple of them that are longer, so don't worry. Some of them are quite short. But the first thing I wanted to talk about was composition, because I think that's where I see the amateur photographer really missing out on some fantastic opportunities. And it's such a simple shift in how you look with dramatic improvement on the final quality of your images. So one of the first things I would suggest is fill the frame. So this is my daughter. She actually did her own makeup for this and wanted me to photograph her. And notice how the entire focus is on her face. I even chopped some of the top of her head off, which some people would think would be a bad thing. But if you ever watch movies, and when they're doing sort of close-ups and they're doing intimate scenes with people, you'll actually notice that they chop the top of the head off. So it's a very common technique because we don't really care about the top of the head unless it's part of the costume. But here there's enough of the kerchief that we have a strong sense of it. And instead we can focus on the makeup job that she did. So she did all this makeup using kitchen supplies. The brown powder is actually cocoa powder, and she mixed it up with some cream and stuff to make the dripping blood. So filling the frame with her face like that really makes it a much more powerful image than if I had pulled back and had mostly background. Okay. Okay. Okay, so Corinne, I'm sorry, just did it that way to make, I want to make sure everything's going okay. So it looks like it's okay. And so I'm moving back here. So filling the frame is one of the best strategies that you can do. One of the other things is getting rid of the distractions. So you'll notice in these two photographs, the one on the left, I started taking the photos and all of a sudden I noticed that she had a giant tree growing out of the top of her head. So all I did was I just moved. I just stepped a little bit to the side, a little bit to the right of the photo frame so that the tree got moved over to her right and the background was much more pleasing. So there is a little bit of distraction you'll notice on the bottom corner, but that I could easily crop out if this was an image I wanted to use. Often what happens is we get so excited by the moment that we forget to take a quick scan of the background to see if it's enhancing the image or whether it's making the image a little bit blah. So some people may not notice the tree, but I think for my eye, that makes a big difference, having the thing growing out of her head versus not growing out of her head. Another composition trip is using triangles. So this was a family actually I shot on the weekend, and mom with their two sons. And the image on the left is a good image. There's nothing wrong with that image, but they're lined up in a line. And as I was taking the photo, I thought, you guys look great. The graffiti's awesome. I really like the vibe. But it was kind of boring because it was flat. And what I did was I created a triangle on the right. So you'll see the mom is still sitting. And then the two sons, I had one crouching and one standing. And if you take a look at it for the shape of the heads, you can connect them up to make a triangle. So we can connect the heads and we have a triangle. And that's one of the tricks that artists use all the time in order to improve the quality of the images. It makes it more interesting, more dynamic. And you can do that just by changing heights of different people, having them crouch, have them stand tall, bent over, and also there's another photo coming up where you get to see that in action as well. When you have them in just a lineup, sometimes, not always, all these rules start to be broken. Sometimes it makes it a little bit more boring, a little bit drier. Okay, so sometimes it works to have them lined up, but sometimes it makes it more interesting if you can create triangles. Another thing, Karina and I were talking about how you can use your photographs as the details to make your scrapbooking come alive. So here I just have a couple of details that I had taken this summer that I was actually imagining doing some artwork with as sort of for layers and to make the images a little bit more interesting. And on your scrapbook pages, you could even use it as a background and have the proper images, the people or the things that you want to focus or highlight on sitting on top of these as the background images. So you have lots of opportunity at Halloween to capture lots of different details that would make fantastic background pictures. So I'm thinking about the spider webs, the fake spider webs. You can tease that out, you go in, you take a detailed picture, and then you have an amazing backdrop for your photos. You could take pictures of a pumpkin patch, you could take pictures of caution tape, like zoom in really close to the caution tape that a lot of people have decorating their yards, and then that could become the background for one of your pages. So use that artistic eye, because you don't always know when you first take it, but sometimes you're just looking, you know what, this page looks great, it's a little bit blah, what can I use? And then you have some of those detail shots available to you. So just something to keep in mind. Another thing, when you're doing groups of people, if you take a look at this family, I really love this shot. A lot of it has to do with the way the light goes. The family was fantastic. They were so much fun to shoot. But you notice that they're really squished together. In a photograph, it doesn't look bad. It looks good. In real life, they were probably feeling a little bit awkward because they never stand that close together. And so what happens is that when you take a photograph, certain things, because of the physics of the optics and so on, get exaggerated. And if there was a tiny gap, say, between the mom and her son, a little bit of a gap there, it would have become exaggerated in the photo. So by pulling people together, even artificially, it really makes the image much more powerful. And to me, this is a very strong image because of the closeness of the family. Sometimes I go the opposite and I put big gaps between them and exaggerate the distance. But having just a little bit of a gap seems to make an image fall flat. So I often even just use humor, right? You can say, pretend you like each other, or just something silly to get people to nuzzle in a little bit closer. Changing your perspective, there's a couple of things in this particular image. Notice that there's a triangle. If you follow the heads, you've got the young woman up on the far left, and then her brother and sister and brothers. You go along from left to right, you have it going down and then up. And so you have that visual triangle, which makes it a much more interesting image. I was concerned about the youngest child here not being included in some of the photos, so I actually lowered myself so that I was at eye level with her, and then had everyone kind of crouch in, get tight together. I was shooting low. We've got a triangle. So here we've got 3 of the different things that I talked about to make what I think is a really beautiful image of this particular family. So I'm just going to zoom out here to make sure it's going. Oh, the slides are not advancing? Still seeing the daughter? Oh, okay. Have you been hearing everything I've been saying? Uh-oh. I wonder if refreshing the screen might help. Has anyone been able to hear me? It's a good thing I stopped and checked. Oh dear. Oh dear. So maybe I'll change the screen sharing so that seems to be an issue. Screen share. Okay, I'm back here. But it was funny. So yes, you can hear me. Just jump to the family. But oh, they can't see the slides, and the folks been trying to refresh. Can't see the images. That's strange. Okay, I had it was okay. So maybe I'll try a different way of screen sharing then. Okay, so try desktop. We'll try it this way. I had it just on that. Oh, that doesn't look good. Present to everyone. Okay, so the last one I heard was fill the frame. So it seems to be a time lag then. Orange box around on the left of the screen, but nothing for a long time. The slide was stuck to your daughter all the time. Okay, it looks like different people. So can you see now? Sound is great, so I have a loud voice. Oh boy. I'm sorry, Sandra. That's frustrating to be kicked out. Okay, let's see. Can you see the fill the frame slide right now? Can you see my screen? It says up, there's a green band at the top that says you're sharing and presenting to everyone. So could everyone just type in yes or no if you see a PowerPoint presentation, it's not filling the whole screen for you, and it's got a green band up at the top. So just click hello, or just click yes or no if you're able to see that, please. And we'll see if we can get this going. Okay, so you can hear me. What do you see on the screen, I guess is what I'm asking. So you see, it says fill the frame. It's the zombie daughter. So yes, yes. Okay, if I make it a little bit bigger. Okay, so I'm just trying to make this a little bit bigger. So the question is do you want me to go back over these slides now that you can see them? Yeah, and there will be a background because I'm afraid to put it on the other kind of screen share because I can't keep the chat going. So let's see if I can try to get that. So slideshow. And oops. So is that going to be good enough now? Okay, so if I click on that slide, so fill the frame, and then I have the one with the fall colors in the background. Okay, everyone's saying yes, please. What's the word? Okay, so that's all good now. It's such a scary picture. So Judy, yeah, it's a pretty scary picture. She greeted the kids at Halloween wearing that particular outfit. So she handed out the candy wearing that outfit. Okay, so get rid of distractions. Can everyone see that one now? Yay! Okay, so it's not as big as we would want, which is too bad. But I'm afraid to make it... Okay, so we're good to go. Thanks, Sarah. Appreciate that. All right, so get rid of distractions. This is one I guess you heard me, but you didn't see the example, so I can go a little faster. Okay, so here you can see the tree growing out of her head. Okay, so as I was taking the photo, I was excited about the colors. I loved a tree growing out of her head. So all I did was I stepped to the right. I just moved over a little bit to the right so that the tree moved over here. And now the background is good. So even if I wanted to crop in later, I would have a nice, beautiful background. Okay? All right, excellent, Karine. Thank you. That's a good idea. So you guys can enlarge the screen on the computer if you like. So doing that, very often we get so excited about the individual faces and expressions and so forth that we forget to do just a very quick scan of the background. And that's often the difference with that practice makes. You just have to mentally say, this time when I take photos, every time I take a photo, just before I hit click, I'm just going to scan the background and make sure that nothing strange is growing out of that person's head. Because once you notice it, you can't unsee it. Now, every time I look at this photo, I can't unsee that tree. I'm stuck with that tree. So get rid of the distractions before you shoot is so much easier. So this was the triangles example that I was talking about before. Now you can see. So this was a family that I took the photos of, and I started off with this particular arrangement. They actually had to climb into this hole to get to this little ledge. They were pretty adventurous. I really loved the graffiti. They were in jeans. I thought it would look kind of cool, especially with the boys' shoes. But it felt blah. Like it was a nice photo. They looked great on it, but it was blah. And so what I did was I decided to use the principle of triangles, which is something that as photographers or any kind of artist, you guys use it all the time in scrapbooking as well, in order to achieve something more dynamic, more interesting, more balanced. You can set your composition with a triangle theme. And so here you'll notice I kept mom in the exact same spot. She's in exactly the same spot as she was here. But I had one son crouch down and the other son stand up. And so now what I have is a triangle that visually brings the eye from person to person in a much more interesting and dynamic way than here where it was just linear. I mean, it's a tiny bit of a triangle because there's a bit of a height difference, but it's very little. So this is a decent picture. This is a better picture. Okay? So these were the details. I think you heard me talk about the details before. Should I go over it again, or can you so if somebody can just let me know, you heard what I said about details before, and these are just the examples that I was trying to show you. So these are the kinds of things that can really make a difference. And so I know that when I've made photo books, I've often used these kinds of details, and I've put the detail in the entire page to fill the entire spread, and then put individual photos that are connected to that particular thing on top or beside, wedged in little corners. And so you could put sort of something here, something up here, any of these places that are maybe a little bit less interesting, and then you can keep these beautiful details to kind of frame it. So I'm just checking to see if all is good. All good, okay. Thanks, Julie. So please go over again. Okay, so when you are taking photos, it's really important, especially with the scrapbooking, that you take the time to find examples of details that will make the difference on your pages between blah and magic. And these kinds of details are the things that will make the difference. So for example, when we're talking about Halloween pictures, honestly, just going in, zooming in on a pumpkin and getting the texture of the pumpkin, that could make a really striking background for some of your pages. Or just as a little detail on the side, just to make a pop of color. If you have a lot of bland colors or a lot of black and white, you'd have a pop of orange somewhere on the page. It would be really interesting. Karina and I were talking before about how you could take the cobweb, the fake cobwebs, flatten it out, maybe spread it over a brick or something, and zoom in photos of that, and it would make for really beautiful texture backgrounds. And if you get really good with Photoshop and stuff, you can even make it sort of semi-transparent and really cool things like that. So the details are what makes a difference, I think, in stepping up your game and to make really powerful pages for your scrapbooks. So this was the example here where I was talking about getting together, moving people close together so that they're not so far apart. So over here, notice I have quite a bit of space between them, and I tend to go one of the two extremes. I either put like a really obvious space between people like this, or if I have them close together, I make them scrunch in really close. So if you think about it, there's no way that this family would ever in a million years be standing that close together. It would just be awkward and uncomfortable. But in a photograph, it looks awesome. It resonates with whoever's looking at it, and they're saying, yes, this is a close, loving family, just by how they're arranged. And so when you're taking pictures of kids in costumes, or they come to your door, then have them just huddle in. And I use, sometimes I'll say silly things like, pretend you like each other, or, who farted? And sometimes that is what will break down those defenses. So just that composition technique really makes for a much more powerful image. If you can imagine here, if you had little gaps where little holes, your eye would tend to move to those little holes because it would be often much lighter in color. And so our eye is often drawn to whatever's the brightest. So here in this photo, this backlit lighting of the sun and the faces are the lightest parts, and that's where our eye gets drawn to here. And if we had these gaps in here, the light would be coming through those gaps, and that's what our eye would be drawn to instead. Okay? So this was a changing perspective that you heard me talk about, but you didn't see the image. And actually, this image takes into account a few of the rules that I've already talked about. So, for example, really obvious is the triangle. You can see here, boom, 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 we have this really nice triangle, which makes it visually very interesting. I also have them in really tight and close to each other. These are all siblings. He graduated, and these are his younger siblings here to celebrate his graduation. So I had them in moving in really, really close. The hands are all natural and relaxed. Here we have a triangle, you can see. Here we have a triangle. All these triangles make for really, even here on his hat, you have a triangle. All these triangles make for a very interesting visual composition. And then the last thing that I wanted, the reason why I pulled this image here, is that this girl is significantly younger than her siblings, and when you take a look at a lot of other photos, she was just as important as her siblings. And that happens at Halloween, right? You've got these little kids, and one of the biggest mistakes that we often do as parents is that we don't want to bend our knees. We stand up and we take a picture shooting down on them. If you just bend your knees and get down to eye level, look at the connection that this little girl has with the camera. It's awesome. And had I been standing up and looking down at her, I don't think that I would have got that connection. And so I had everybody else crouch down to her level so that she was equally represented in the photo. And so that's one of the reasons why this is a powerful image. So we've got triangles, we've got the closeness, and we changed the perspective to include the young girl. Does that make sense? If I can get a few of you just to type in to let me know if that's making sense or if I'm a rambling idiot. I would appreciate it. Because the chat seems to have slowed down. So, okay, so Corinne had talked to you guys about getting to know your camera. And I know even for me with my nice big camera, it took me a few years to finally sit down and take the time to learn the settings for it. And it's really important because there's so many cool things in these point and shoot cameras. I grabbed my daughter's one and I was playing around with it just to kind of see what was out there. And it's really quite astonishing what you can accomplish. So one of the things that often people complain about with their point and shoot when you just put it on auto is that the background gets really, really dark. And all, you guys see that sometimes with the flash or without the flash. You get a really dark background, whatever you're focusing in on. Like in here, the case of the sandwich, I didn't take this photo. I just grabbed this one off. I should look for the reference for it as an example. But the difference between these two here is how long you have the shutter speed open. So the bigger the number that you see on your camera, if it says 200 or 500 or 800, you actually put a 1 over that number, and that tells you how quickly the shutter will open and close. So 1/200th of a second is really, really fast, whereas 1/3 of a second is relatively speaking, it's open a lot longer. And the difference then, if you look at these two photos, is that this one, the background is actually much better lit than this background. And so it becomes a really cool tip in order for you to maximize. And you know what? Even if you can't change the shutter speed on your point and shoot camera, a lot of the settings that you can access allow you to do that. And so you have to know what you're looking for. So what I would suggest that you guys do is that you make sure that you take a look at your guides, and because every camera has a different name, so some of the cameras that I looked up, they're often called night portrait or night landscape. And actually you can hear, I just opened my daughter's camera, that was that funny noise you could hear in the background. And on hers, there was actually, so basically anything that says night, it would be a good thing to pick. So I'm just pulling up on hers because I was curious to know what it was. So twilight would be, if you see something that says twilight, that would be good. I looked at twilight portrait, and then her camera here has something cool called handheld twilight, which is crazy. And what all three of those, anything that says twilight or nighttime portrait or landscape, they use this trick. This is what they're doing. So it's amazing. What happens is you take your photograph on that particular setting. If you took it on your regular setting, you would get that really dark background that people hate when they use their flash. You know what I mean, right? So you take the picture, you've got the person's face is like almost glowing, and everything behind them is dark, dark, dark. So if you use that night portrait or night landscape or twilight type setting, and often you might have more than one, so play with them, test it out. I was just playing, checking with my dog out in the front, so the poor dog was getting flashes all the time. The way it works is that the flash will go off, so say this is the picture that we end up with. The flash will go off for a very short burst and light up whatever's close to the camera. And then the flash goes off, but the shutter stays open. And as the shutter stays open, some of the light from back here will be able to reach the camera, and the background is better lit. It's amazing. This one setting that said handheld twilight, the way it worked was that it opened and closed the shutter several times in a row so that you didn't have to worry about the camera shaking, that handheld shake that we often see that causes blur. So some cameras will have really cool, this one's a Sony CyberShot. I don't know if anyone here has a Sony CyberShot. It's a pretty cool camera. But if you use that setting, you can go from this, really dark background, even at nighttime, to a much more evenly lit photo. So I'd love for you guys to try that out. I was amazed at how well it worked. Really powerful strategy to make your photos so much more interesting. Third point I wanted to talk about, I just put under the category of spooky stories. Again, thinking about your scrapbook pages. So I just put a whole bunch of tricks here, things that will help with your pumpkins, because pumpkins are pretty freaking awesome. So one of the things sometimes people think is that, oh, I got to shoot in bright light or in dark. But one of the best times to shoot is actually at dusk. So when you've got your jack-o'-lantern finally all carved out, take it outside at dusk, at twilight. And what happens is that, especially if you use those twilight settings, you can really start to manipulate the light, even with a point and shoot camera, in order to get a much more interesting photo. Another trick, it's so obvious, but it wouldn't have occurred to me, was just to carve larger holes and to choose a design that's going to allow more light to come through. Some designs, you know, the people get very, very intricate, but you hardly get any light coming through. So even just making the holes a little bit larger, 10, 20, 30% larger, is going to make them for a much more interesting photo. Also, taking several pumpkins and having a group of them. I've got a photo coming up so you can see a whole bunch of pumpkins in a line. That allows for a lot more light to reach the camera, so it makes it a lot of fun. I know that a group of kids here in my town of London, they carved pumpkins just as a community building thing. There were a group of kids that were involved with an organization called Free the Children, which Mark Kilberger and Craig Kilberger run here. And there's a local guy who has hundreds of pumpkins for Halloween in his front yard, and he collects money for charities. And so this group of kids, they made about 30 pumpkins and delivered it to him so he would have even a more spectacular display. So in the case of a photograph, what a great opportunity to take, you know, you have a lot more light coming through. Add extra candles if you want to take pictures of the pumpkin. So instead of just one candle, have at least 3 inside. And if you do add extra candles, make sure you make a chimney. So what I do is the lid, when I take it out, I put a triangle notch in it so that any smoke can get out. Otherwise, it gets pretty bad. And what also works are those artificial, those pretend candles that are actually like mini flashlights. You turn them off and on with a switch. So I guess electric candles, but again, put enough of them to be of interest. You can even try putting a flashlight inside, especially if you have a short one, and that could light it up. So just position yourself with the camera so that you can't see the candles or the flashlight, and so it's just the glow of the light that they're producing rather than the actual candle. Another thing is sometimes happens is that the background gets kind of boring. And so one thing that you can do is actually take a flashlight and put it behind another one, not the one that was inside, but a different one, put it behind. And so it kind of will give it that sort of rim light that we see at sunsets that a lot of people like. Now you can get that rim light with your pumpkin. Try different camera angles. Try lying on your belly and taking a photo. See if you can look up. So much more interesting than the traditional, you know, take a photo from where I'm standing. Try and be creative, just as creative in taking the photos as you are in arranging them in your scrapbooks. One tip that I had heard, which I thought was kind of interesting, to add some extra light and give some dimension, is if you have a fire in your fireplace, even not a full fire, you could just take some pieces of newspaper and light them on fire in your fireplace, or if you have a fire pit in your backyard, and then put the pumpkin in front of that. And so you'll get a glow behind the pumpkin plus the glow inside the pumpkin, and it makes for a really cool effect. Make sure you keep the camera steady. I'll go over some tips on how to do that in a couple of minutes. And I thought this was a great idea. Why not take a life story series of photos of the pumpkin? Take a photo when you buy it, when you've picked the perfect pumpkin. So of the whole bin that has all the pumpkins, or if you go to a pumpkin patch, take a picture there. Take a picture when it's in your kitchen. Take a picture when you first cut it. Take a picture all the way through, all the way to the compost or to the garbage when you're done. And what a great spread that would make in your scrapbook. It'll be a lot of fun and interesting and give you an opportunity to be creative in a different way. So when and where to shoot. 4th category of tips. So twilight isn't just for vampires. So I kind of talked about this already because I remembered this picture. But you can see here how there's so many pumpkins and there's some lights, but you still have that sense of twilight. And there's enough glow from the pumpkins that it works really, really well. So if you only had 1 or 2 pumpkins, then what you would do is that you would go in and you would get really close to them. But because we have summer and we have that little bit of extra light up here and we have some of the light from the sky, we can afford to pull back to get the full effect of all of them. Look for the direction of the light that you do have available and then use it to your advantage. So this person was really clever. They just took the pumpkin and they noticed that here we've got twilight. There was just a little bit of light coming from behind the pumpkin to kind of frame it so it didn't get lost in a dark background. So look, Sandy says she does that all the time. That's fantastic. So these are ideas that work. You know, that's why people use them. So they're just awesome. And here you've got the, the framing of the pumpkin plus the glow. You've got that nice glow effect, and you didn't have to use a flash at all. If you used a flash in this instant, you would end up seeing just a really bright pumpkin and you wouldn't get that sense of glow. So this was enough light for the camera to capture the image without having to use a flash. When you're dealing with kids, and we all love kids in their Halloween costumes, make sure you work quickly. Sometimes we get so uptight about getting things perfect that we miss the moment. And if you work quickly with kids, mess with their minds, be silly. My friend was telling me about this game that she would play where they would have to stay very still for the count of 3, and then they'd get a chance to go and tickle each other. Something like that. Just make it fun. Having photos done shouldn't be torture. I know my own sister, sometimes her family, they kind of lose their mind because she's always taking pictures, and it's not always fun for them. So make it fun, because Halloween is all about having a great time. And don't aim for perfection, aim for emotion. This picture isn't perfect, but it's one of my all-time favorites. It's actually up on my website. It's the main picture on my website. Technically, I don't know, it probably is missing a lot of things, but to me, it is just sheer joy and perfection. And so that's what you should be aiming for. There's sometimes that will trump everything, and that's what's going to mean the most to you in the long run. The other thing is to practice, practice, practice. Learn the limits of your camera by practicing before the big day. Really important to do. Sometimes we put too much pressure on ourselves. You think, okay, I heard Anita say, try this or that. And if you don't take even just 5-10 minutes before the big day to see if it does work for you, or if you've got the right setting on your camera, you know how to deal with the flash. If you don't take those few minutes before you need to do it, you're really missing out on the opportunity, because on the actual day that you're taking the big photos, the ones with the kids, the grandkids, the ones that you get excited about, you're so stressed out about trying to figure it out that you miss the opportunity. So practice. Okay, low light. I know a lot of you were asking about low light, and Karina and I were talking about it as well. And the reality is a camera like mine costs a lot of money because it's awesome in low light. And that's what you pay for when you buy a camera. My iPhone is actually fantastic for taking pictures in full light. It takes really good photos. I've actually used photos for full page spreads that I took with my iPhone when I went to the beach, and I used some of those as backdrop pictures of the waves, for example, where I didn't really want to take my big camera to the, to get salt spray all over it. And it works great in full light, but low light is a challenge if you have a camera like an iPhone or a point and shoot. But there are a few tricks, a few things that you can do to maximize the light that you do have available to you, and that's what I wanted to mention to you today. Really easy is just crop out the dark areas, move in closer. Okay, if you've got a lot of dark area around the kids, move in so that their faces that are reflecting the little bit of light that is available is occupying most of the frame. You can add light. Take flashlights. Give flashlights to the kids and have them hold the flashlight under their chin pointing up. That's actually called ghoul lighting. It works so well, and the reason why it's so spooky is that because the light is going in the opposite direction to how we always see it. When we have lights in our home or we're outside, the light is always coming from above and the shadows are cast down. When you shine a flashlight under your chin, you've got that ghoul lighting, so it looks really spooky. And if you've got a nice powerful flashlight, you don't need to use a flash on your camera, and you've got an amazing photo of the kids. Some people will even use like a string of lights, and kind of, you've got to be careful with that one because you don't want to have a choking hazard. I would never do it with a very small child. But sometimes with older children, you could take a string of lights and just sort of hang it over their arms or something, and that would give them a little bit of light into the face. And you know what? Sometimes dark is okay too. It's great for setting the mood. And that can be kind of fun and a great opportunity for making your scrapbook more interesting. Another thing is use a tripod. You could be a human tripod or use some sort of firm surface. What you want to do is keep the camera as steady as possible, especially if you're using those twilight settings. The twilight settings are essential for you have to keep the camera as still as possible. If you reduce the shutter speed to lower than maybe 1/60th, it depends on how shaky your hands are. I can sometimes get a little bit lower if I make myself as a human tripod. So you can see in this picture here, what he's done is his legs are spread apart to make him really, really balanced. And his arms, you'll notice, are under the camera rather than above the camera, supporting it. What I'll often do is actually even more is his elbows that are pointing out a little bit, I'll actually pull the elbows into my body to make it myself even more steady. Sometimes when the elbows are pointing out, you're sort of a little bit more tipsy. So, no, not that I've been drinking, but you tip around a little bit more if your elbows are out. You pull your elbows in and hold the camera from underneath. That will help make you steady to reduce camera shake. Find something to perch it on. Maybe you have a chair, a stool, the ground. Sometimes that would be awesome for a photo. Put the camera on the ground and then just use a self-timer so that you don't have any shake at all. So it doesn't have to be a fancy tripod. There are lots of ways of handling that. All right, good. Now, the last thing, trick your flash. The first thing you want to make sure to see if it's possible is if you can turn off your flash. I know even with the iPhone, you have the option of having auto or turning it off altogether. And a lot of point and shoot cameras do have somewhere in the menu, if you look in the guide, there'll be a setting that you can turn off the flash so that you don't have to worry about it, and you can use some of those other strategies. Because having a darker image for a Halloween image is not a bad thing. Your camera will automatically be trying to make it as bright as if you were in the middle of the day. And you don't want that to happen. You just want to be using the light that's already present. We call that the ambient light. So the light that's already around, even if it's not a lot, it's enough to set the mood for your photo. So if there's any way that you can figure out how to turn off the flash, not all cameras allow you to do that, but many do. So look it up and see how to turn it off and on, and that will save you a lot of time later on. If you can't, or if you forget how to, because that happens to me sometimes if I don't do something very often, you can try blocking your flash partially or completely just using your finger. Some people will use like a little piece of card or like the cardboard or something, but it's just as easy to use your finger to cover it. So if you take a picture and you say, oh, that's close, but it's a little bit too much flash, cover up half of the flash so that you reduce the amount of light reaching the person, and you might end up with a much better image. Or you can completely block the flash. And sometimes it's worth taking 3 photos in a row. Take one that has the full flash, one that has half flash, and one that has no flash. And again, this is in your practice time. See how they compare. See which look you like better. Depending on how dark it is, where you are, what your subject is, you may find that you like one look better over another. And when you combine this with your twilight settings on your camera, you can get some really cool effects. So I'd encourage you to try that. Make sure that you're the correct distance away from your subject. This is not my photo. I had actually Googled and this came up. I think it was one of the first ones as a bad flash photo, they called it. The person who took it said it was a bad flash photo. And I think this is why people generally hate flash, because they take a look at this and they think, oh yeah, I hate this because it looks like a flash. The problem here is that one person is too close to the camera and the other person is too far from the camera. And so that's why you're getting that discrepancy. So here, just walking a little bit over to the left and having the 2 people side by side would allow for both of them to be lit equally. Or if you wanted to focus on the woman, you can move the camera over so that you're just focusing on her, step back a little bit, and that'll reduce the amount of light. Or cover up the flash so that only half of the light reaches her, and you'd be set. Having the preview screen on your point and shoot or on the iPhone is such a lifesaver, because on the spot you can quickly adapt, saying, oh, too much light, too little light, and make the adjustments on the fly. And eventually you get so good at it that you don't have to think about it too much. You just see it and you start to respond automatically, but that just comes with practice. The other thing that's really kind of cool, especially for Halloween pictures, is to find some sort of colored piece of plastic. And if you take that colored piece of plastic, it has to be translucent or transparent. So any kind of cellophane in the kitchen sometimes, or packaging, you can find like something that allows light to get through, and it's red or purple or green. And here you can see all the different colors that you could cast. And I'm thinking for Halloween, wouldn't a green filter, like in just any piece of plastic that you put over the flash, having that green shadow or a red shadow or an orange shadow would look fantastic. every type of color is going to have a different intensity. So you'll notice that yellow is quite bright. It's going to allow much of the light through. It's just going to change the tint, whereas the green and the red in particular are going to absorb a lot of the light, so it's also going to darken. So it's a really cool little trick. You don't have to get anything fancy or expensive. Honestly, just look in your kitchen. And sometimes in the packaging of the food that you can get, you can see some cool things. And you can adjust the amount of color by how many fold it in half. Now you've got twice the thickness, you've reduced even more the light. And so Corinne says you have papers for that. Brilliant idea. So if you have some of the thinner papers, that would work great. So play around with it. It's a really cool effect, and Halloween is like the perfect time to play with this and get some really funky photos for your scrapbook pages. And last here, make sure that your battery is fully charged. And the reason you want to do that is that if you discharge the battery, flash output, or you're going to get, maybe you practice when the battery was full, but then when you're actually shooting, you have the battery down low and you don't understand why you're getting different results. It's because the flash output isn't going to be as strong when the battery is low. So that's one of the things to make sure you have a fully charged battery when you're doing these important shoots. And so Corinne, that brings us here. In my opinion, if you've got better photos, you've got better memories and better scrapbooking. So I don't know if anybody has any questions. That's my presentation. I know it's a lot of information and not a lot of information, but did anyone have any questions? I've got the chat open. I can see here. I think there's a bit of a time delay from when you type the question and it arrives in the chat box. So I will hang on here. And I guess I'll ask you, this was my first webinar. Was I speaking too quickly? I'd like a little bit of feedback because I'd like to do a better job next time. So were the slides okay? Did you find them helpful? Was the selection of information helpful? And if you're not comfortable letting me know, maybe you can send Corinne a message on Facebook with things that you think worked well and didn't work well. I'd be very grateful because I'm always looking to improve, and it would help me to have that kind of information. So to me, it's not criticism, it's constructive advice and feedback from awesome people. Yeah, so there's, a time delay of about 2 minutes. Okay, and I'm getting all these things popping up. So, fantastic. So good. It sounds like it went well. And right now we have 24 viewers. So I told my daughter I was hoping for 10. So I feel like I've accomplished something. Yay, 24 viewers. I'm not sure what we maxed out at. But it looks like there were some technical problems for some people. And yes, I do have notes that summarize the slides. So I'm going to talk to Corinne about the best way to make that happen. And awesome. So my voice wasn't too, sometimes I worry that I speak too quickly. That's sort of one of my, and if I speak too slowly, then that gets goofy as well. So interesting, Corinne, it's funny because in the chat box it says there's 31 people, and on the WebinarAlly it says there's 24 people. So I'm not sure how many people we have here. So grateful. I know who couldn't make it because they were in all these different time zones, and you know, even in Canada for a lot of people it's pretty late. I don't know if you're seeing what I'm seeing, but that's pretty easy. So yeah, and I am part of the group, so if you ever want to ask me a question, you can just tag me in that question and I would be happy to answer it. And you know what would be really thrill me, what would make me really excited, is if you could try some of these tips. Take a picture without using a setting, and then take the same picture trying on that twilight or nighttime portrait setting and compare the two. Post both of them up there. That would be really cool. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. You're just trying to learn the effect. I think everyone can, I just lost the chat box. That's what I'm trying to, I thought I had closed all these things, but I guess I hadn't. So I've lost the chat box completely here. Something happened to it. Chat wing here. Oh, there it is. Sorry, I clicked it. Okay. Yes, Pat, that would be a great idea. So this is something we have to talk to the developer of this particular tool that we have, so I will contact her to see if we can handle that. Oh, Sarah, that sounds fantastic. All right. Okay, and so what we'll be doing is that this will be posted up. It's actually recorded. Once we're done, it'll be transferred up to YouTube automatically, and we can share the link. So if you missed something or you wanted to go over something, and I do have this PDF that I created, the Halloween Photo Tips PDF, and it has a list of the tips with just in very straightforward form here, not as much detail as I gave you. Speaking to you, but you could just print and you'd have a few things to help you remember. Honestly, rule of thumb, whenever you get a lot of information like this, it's too much information. There's no question it's too much information. So what I always do is I pick, okay, 2 or 3 things that I'm going to act on immediately. So if composition has been a challenge to you, okay, think triangles, or think getting close together, or maybe changing perspective. Okay, crouching when you're taking photos can transform your images. Just lowering yourself. If you make that commitment to yourself for composition for the next few weeks, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and make sure that for every time I take a photo to bend down and to try a different perspective. Don't worry about the other things, just try the one. And when that becomes automatic, you can go back to the list and you can try another one. I just realized I don't have to share the screen anymore. I can just, I can be on here now. Because the screen was probably making you dizzy. It was making me dizzy. So pick the 1 or 2 things that you're going to try. I encourage all of you, make sure that you try and buttons on your digital camera. So on my daughter's here, she has a touch screen one, and I'll just pull it up the thing so that you can see. And when you click on the mode, there's different options here. So you can see there's all these different options. And so for hers, one that's so-called scene selection, it's SCN, I press that, and you'll see here in the last one on the first row, okay, it says Twilight Portrait, and then Twilight, and then Handheld Twilight. So you can see those 3. They all offer a slightly different effect. And so if you take 3 images in a row, remember the order that you did, and compare them, you'll be able to see which one is going to allow the background to be lit more, and which one is going to avoid the flash on the face, and so on. So every camera is different. This is a touch one, but it'll say twilight or nighttime, twilight portrait or nighttime portrait. So, Judy's asking for my website. I actually have 2 different websites. There's my mouse moving there. One of the websites, my family website, so I'm a photographer, and my family and portrait website is anitawatkins.com. And I also do a lot of work in headshots. That's sort of my, where I guess maybe we could tell you my story. Photography is actually my midlife crisis. I turned 50 this year, and I now have this kick-ass business that I've created. I'm a high school teacher, and I have gone part-time, and I love what I do. I love to teach. I love teenagers, but I wasn't finding the challenge, and I'm finding the new opportunities, meeting different kinds of people, using my skills in a different way has been really exciting. So it's never too late to reinvent yourself. So I'm proof positive. So Sarah's asking about the new HTC phone camera that has SLR settings. Any thoughts on that? I think that's awesome. I think some of these cell phones have phenomenal features now. In full light, my iPhone, you probably couldn't tell in a lot of situations. There's certain things it can't do, but in a lot of situations where you want everything in focus, you can't tell the difference. If I did 2 prints for them, I think they're fantastic. With the SLR settings, a lot of it actually, the settings on the point and shoot camera, those ones I showed you in the back, those are SLR settings. They just have a special little program that they put together, and then they put it with that, they say we'll keep the shutter speed open longer, we'll have the flash on for this long. So they put this little program together. Those are the kinds of decisions that I would make as a photographer. I would do it all myself. But when you have these different buttons, it's doing it for you. So you don't have as much control, But most people don't need that much control. They just want to say, look, I'm taking a picture at night. I'll press the button. It does the thinking and calculations for me. So that works fantastic. I'm not familiar with the HTC phone camera. I'm unfortunately an iPod girl. I'm a Mac girl, so we have one of everything in our house. It's a Mac. Any other questions? I guess there's a bit of a delay here. It's been long. It's been an hour, and I really am very grateful for all of you for participating and listening. For Credence and I's our foray into this particular area. It's been exciting, and I hope we got you some information that you can implement right away. And please, please, please share on Facebook your photos. I would love to see them, even before you scrapbook them. That would be awesome, because I am a photographer. So I don't see any more questions. I think then it is late here in Canada. It's 11:30, and I think in other parts of the world it's probably dinner time for some of you. So Judy, thank you. So nice to meet you too. This is a very strange experience talking to air, but I'm so grateful that at least we had the chat so I can get a little bit of feedback and we could quickly change things. And I just lost you for a few slides. Okay, well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It's funny. It's funny how you can feel love in a chat box. Isn't that the strangest thing? Yeah, it is late. And I have to teach high school kids tomorrow morning. So I'm a biology and chemistry teacher, so I'll have to get up for that. You're very welcome. Thank you so much, everyone. And Corinne will tell you how you can access this on YouTube. I don't think it'll take too long, but she'll post all that information for you. Thanks so much. Nice meeting you, and can't wait to see your awesome photos and scrapbook pages. Good night, everyone.